won't spend too much time sort of setting the scene because I think it's been done quite well, and at this point everybody sort of knows it. You know, there's 5 generations in the workforce. They have high expectations in terms of the experiences that they have and those experiences online. People's expectations have been set by what they have at home, you know, the consumer-based companies like Google, Netflix, Spotify, etc. And so as a result of that, their expectations at work are exactly the same, that consumerized-based experience. At the same time, there's rapid change. Technology's changing, global competition, we've got changing business models, and as a result, there's a skills gap that we all need to fill. If you couple with that, then it's quite interesting. You know, I was watching Yash on his social media, and I follow Yash on social media, and he does an incredible job, and I'm often liking his posts. But we actually look at our phone. Apparently, it's 2,617 times a day right now. So you can imagine how disruptive that is. So it's something like 6 hours in your day is kind of interrupted. And apparently now, the human concentration span is 8 seconds. So that's 8 seconds. That's less than a goldfish. You've already tuned out to my presentation. So what are you going to do? I mean, it's your job to work with business, to engage the learner, to fill the skills gap. What are you going to do? How are you going to engage the learner? Do you provide video? Well, actually, this was surprising to me when I joined Skillsoft about a year ago. 80% of learners consider books important. It's an important way of learning. And in fact, millennials actually rate it higher than other generations. You know, when Yash sort of was setting us up in terms of thinking about different preferences, well, different people have different ways of learning, and they've got different preferences. Do you provide them with more content? Oh my gosh, there's so much content out there. Yes, you've got to provide them with content, but there's 2,500 Skype calls in 1 second, 7,500 tweets in 1 second, 60,000 Google searches, 69,000 YouTube videos viewed all in 1 second. So maybe not driving more content is the answer. It doesn't necessarily correlate in terms of more learning or more outcomes or increases in skills gaps. Do you provide the same learning experience for everybody? And I actually like the thoughts that Yash was providing us with during the session, because we are all different, we're all unique, and no matter what generation you are, you actually have different preferences. And so engaging learners, there needs to be some sort of personalisation approach to engaging learners. And you know, we're at an L&D conference here today, and unfortunately, Deloitte's 2017 Human Capital Survey essentially says that L&D has a Net Promoter Score of -8. So the only way's up, right? So what do? We started off with Raj taking a look at how culture is such an important part to the change. Yash then talked about the different approaches for developing leaders. I'm going to just look at this more from a digital learning perspective. Obviously, that's what Skillsoft does. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time, and I promise I'm actually going to make up some time, talking about some examples in terms of how you might be able to engage your learners with digital. So first and foremost, Google sort of set the stage in terms of search, and so it needs to be very much at your fingertips in terms of, you know, what learning, but learning based upon, you know, what you require at a point in time. So you need to be able to search like Google does, have search capability. You need to be able to browse like Amazon. You need to be able to have playlists like a Spotify. So that whole consumerized approach in terms of your learning. And at the end of the day, you know, personalization is key in terms of gaining people's attention and keeping their attention. So it's got to be all about me. You know, what is it that I was doing last when I was looking at the environment? I don't think the clicker works over here. There we go. Yeah, what is it that I was doing last when I was in my learning environment? So take me back to what I was doing last. What have people have actually assigned to me? What are my playlists in terms of that Spotify type experience? And what's trending amongst my peers in terms of things that may be of interest to me? At the same time, it's super important to provide the different types of choices in terms of learning styles. So the whole watch, read, listen as options in your learning environment. The other thing that's really important to take note of is that all content is not created equal. MIT, Skillsoft and Accenture, we've actually been doing a research study. We've done phase 1, we're about to enter into phase 2 around brain science. And really looking at what engages the learner and providing that contextualized learning. And there's some quite interesting outcomes which we'll be talking about in coming weeks around that brain science study. But digital learners do not like structured linear learning. They don't like to be told. That it's more of a show me approach. If you actually have a combination of storytelling with emotion, then you engage both the left side of the brain as well as the right side of the brain, and it improves learning outcomes. So there are a couple of examples around some of the studies. We're also, in phase 2, we're going to look at what happens with a growth mindset. Does that increase your chances of learning? We're looking at things like different generations and what the interest level is in terms of engagement around various different types of treatments. So it's really important that you provide different types of learning based upon what you're wanting to learn. I mean, powerful imagery is actually going to increase your recall as well as the application, ability to apply it on the job afterwards. A balance of narration, visuals and text is super, super important based upon the brain science research. Conveyance of meaning rather than rote learning. I mean, I actually went to university with some people that would actually rote learn the information. It's kind of in one ear and out the next. 3 weeks later, you've actually forgotten what it is that you've learned. If you actually convey the meaning, then you're going to recall it and you're going to be able to apply it more effectively on the job. I mean, it's all common sense stuff, right? And then conversational style is proven to be a better way of actually learning. Okay, so we need to have the information at our fingertips for sure. You've got your learning management system, you've got your employee portal, but if it's about learning at my fingertips at a moment of need, then it also needs to be embedded in the application or the process that I'm actually doing. So in this particular example, we're saying we're in Salesforce, I'm in sales, or I'm in pre-sales, I'm about to go see a customer, and I just want to tune up quickly on effective presentations so that I can really nail it and get the customer to buy. So embedded in the application is kind of important in terms of any time, anywhere, at that moment in need. And then lastly, I think Raj started with, both Raj and Yash started with reflection questions. If you start with reflection or what's in it for me, then that also will increase the learning around the individual. In addition, in terms of retention, obviously there needs to be reinforcement. It's not a one-time event. So in the examples here, we're talking about a quick quiz, real-world scenario, what would you do? And you've got to pick an answer, push down to the mobile. The tip of the day based upon what it is that the individual's learnt. And then really a scenario, like a call to action. Okay, this is about effective meetings. Next time you run a meeting, let's look at setting the goals, reflect back on what worked, what didn't, and take note of that so that you can actually improve that in the future. So we've really just spent a few minutes talking about some of the examples that will help engage the learner. And interestingly, I noticed in the question up front, I think that one of the options was around science-based learning, and I think it actually scored quite lowly in terms of engagement. Well, you know, I kind of believe in science, and the research that we've done with MIT really highlights how you might be able to engage the interest of the learner and also improve learning outcomes. So learning-centric, obviously micro-modular, varied treatments, retention-driven, embedded, and mobile. And that's really all I wanted to cover off today.
Right, thanks so much, Melissa. So we will get into the Q&A session now, and I'll just get the ball rolling. I have 2 questions for the panel. I've taken down 3 words which repeatedly came up in the conversation. One was digital, the other is culture, and third is the multi-generation workforce. So as I ask my question, and my first question is to Yash, but before I ask you the question and put you in the spot, I want to credit Yash with something. And I want to tell you how learning really happens, because many times when we come for events or conferences like that, there are skeptics, and there are conversations, and there are all kind of remarks which kind of get made. So let me tell you like a half-a-minute story about myself. About 4 months ago, at an event like this, I heard Yash talk about similar topic, leadership, multi-generation workforce. But he also talked about something which he did not mention today, saying, while we're thinking about the millennials and Z and Y and baby boomers and veterans, you know, there's another generation of workforce which is coming in, which is the robots. Who's thinking about them? Those are the ones we should be really conscious or cognizant about. That seeded the idea in my mind for my TEDx talk, which I gave 2 weeks ago. The topic of my talk was, it is 2020, I'm the Chief Culture Officer of the Robos. So really, I mean, that is how learning happens. It was a concept, it was an idea, and I built it up, and the whole thing flowed. At another conference, on digital, I saw some slides that a speaker was using. The speaker is here, Vinay, somewhere. I love the slides. When I was building my pitch, my deck for the TEDx talk, I sent him a quick message saying, Vinay, I love these slides, can I use it? Within 20 minutes, he had emailed those slides. So I was all set. So if that is not learning, that you make connects, you leverage, you know, learning, slides, content, idea, I don't know what else learning is. So having said that, let me straight away go into the question, Yash, and I've already talked about the question, saying, what is your view on this generation of workforce, cyborgs, robots? How will we deal with all of that?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting one, and I've always believed there's the energy generation, which is the robots. Now, you know, when you think of a robot, what comes to your mind is that robot, you know, like the D1, D2, you know, that kind of a robot, right? If you really see what is happening in the digitization is, the robots are not going to be only in physical form, okay? Even a chatbot, which is just software generated from your simple machine, is a robot, correct? Now, that's what has happened. It has already happened for 10 years and we have not even noticed. For example, you know, the Microsoft Word actually made the typist job redundant. Emails made almost half of the assistant jobs redundant, okay? But did the humanity suffer? It did not. But a big UN cry is being made now, the robots are coming, they're coming after the human jobs and all that. I don't think so, Harlina. That's not going to happen. I think the human beings will figure out a way of doing something better. But everything and anything that's a robot, you know, whether it's a drone, whether, you know, it's a chatbot, whether it's, you know, anything that artificial intelligence or machine can do. But to end it, I want to say that there was a fantastic point made by Jack Ma, I think, just 2 or 3 weeks ago. We were discussing that in our office. And you know what Esther he says is, he's saying that there is IQ, there is EQ. He says the robots and artificial intelligence and deep learning, which is machine learning, deep learning, will even make robots emotional quotient high, because they will be taught how to respond or deal with human emotions. But he has brought in a new concept known as LQ. I don't know if you guys read it or not. And he's talking about the love quotient. He says that the robot will not be able to love you. You may be able to love a robot, but the robot will not be able to love you. That is what will separate the human beings. So I think that's something which is unfolding, and let's see. But don't be worried about it, or there's no gloom, doom, and there's nothing terrible that's going to happen.
Yes, thank you. I think that's an interesting perspective, and it calms many, many minds. Truly does. So, Raj, the next question is for you. You talked repeatedly about digital, and you also talked about culture. And you said culture is the make or break, really, for the digital journey to be successful or to be a disaster. Why do you say that?
So, like I shared, most of the changes today that organizations need to make, the biggest impediment are existing behaviors, practices that kind of go on to define their culture. It's also based on, going back to the question that I started my session on, why do successful organizations fail? You think of organizations, you think of successful individuals and their inability to make a change, and very often it's rooted in a self-image. Kodak thought it was a film company. Well, the world moved on, and they were so wedded to that idea of being a film company that they just couldn't see the signs of change around them that would have otherwise made them stop and reflect and make changes to their strategy and their product. Now, this self-image is what sustains culture in organization. You think of any organization, what are you about? And whether it's enterprise myth or whether it's practices, behaviors, what we recognize, reward, those sustain that self-image. And in times of change, that is what comes in the way of making the transition, of being able to see the signs that the assumptions around which our organization has been built are changing. So culture, therefore, I think is absolutely the foundational element of transformation.
I agree, Raj. Thanks so much. I think that was a crisp or whatever, succinct answer. Audience questions? Let's take few. I am not very sure whether you are supposed to type them out on the app or... Okay, so there are some questions coming up there now. Let me skip the first one. We've talked digital a little bit. Okay, so let's take question number C. How do you distinguish between fad and future in the digital clutter? It's pretty much open to anyone who wants to take it. Distinguishing between fad and future in the digital clutter.
I'm actually just going to draw upon what Raj's comments were in terms of organisations that fail. I think the real cultural divide is that we've been taught for so long that it's not okay to fail. And these startups actually, they don't have all the processes and the rigour that existing and established organisations have. And in their organisation, it is okay to fail. So back to culture, there's going to be a really important aspect to organisations with that cultural change in terms of it being okay to fail. And I cover Asia Pacific, and that is further exasperated in many cultures where you've got face and it's not okay to fail. And I think it's going to be even more challenging in some of those environments to actually change the culture. I mean, it's almost like the Kodak example in terms of how do you tell if it's a fad or not. You've got to try things out. Not everything that you do is actually going to succeed. That comes back to the cultural aspect of it being okay to fail. And if you don't try things out, then you will fail. You will not be, if you've always done what you've always done, you'll never even be what you already are. And so you need to change, and you need to change the cultural side of it.
Right, thanks so much. One more question, and then we will move on. Can we have the questions up on the screen, please? And a quick one.
Harlina, can I make just one quick comment?
A very quick one, Raj.
Okay. See, that question itself comes from a need of seeking emotional security in our decision making. I need to know whether it's a fad or a future before I do something about it. And the reality is you are not going to be able to do that. So going back to Melissa's point, the ability to work with imperfect information, that is bound to change. Going to change is what is going to differentiate your ability to embrace an unknown future.
Right, thanks so much, Raj. And you can see some questions are getting thumbs up and they are popping up, but I will use the privilege I have of being on the stage and go to question number 3, which is anonymous. How do you balance a risk-free environment and agility? Up for grabs.
You don't.
So, you see, so agile, or
When no one can answer, it goes to the CHRO.
agile or agility itself, being agile or agility as a part of your culture itself comes with a little bit of risk attached, okay? Because the entire concept and process of agile is being quick, is being nimble-footed, but at the same time you're grounded in data, you're grounded in some tools, you're grounded in a process, okay, which helps you to be faster, okay? It helps you to be, because the entire premise is that if you're not fast enough, you're chasing a moving target. So it itself is attached with a bit of a risk. Now, if you're a risk-averse organization, you would not want to embrace the agile process, okay? I'm not talking about the agile process of developing software, okay? I'm talking about agility as a part of the organization and how you want to create an agile environment, because that's what I guess is the question about. So the answer is, well, you have to see and deal with risk which come attached with something that is required by the organization. So there's nothing such as a low to no risk environment, nothing.
Right, thanks so much, Yash. With that, we pretty much come to an end. I have last two comments to make. My first comment is really, this entire stuff that we're talking about, leadership, culture, learning, digital, it's not really a movie which has gotten released. It's still script in the making, and there's obviously more to it. And my last comment is really not a comment. It's a Urdu sher. If I have a stage and I have audience, this is what I do. And it goes like this. सितारों के आगे जहान और भी है, अभी इश्क में इम्तिहान और भी हैं. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.